All right, I hit the button. All righty. So, the last two articles for us. We'll go over these tonight. I want you to think through a little bit about this issue of the Wozniak article and technology in the field experience. So, Wozniak, I always think, every time I see it, I think of the Woz, one of the two creators of Apple Computer, Jobs and Wozniak. Every time I see this, I'm like, is that him? Is he a theologian now? Maybe. So he says that the idea of appropriate use, and that's the key, appropriate use of technology can decrease isolation in a field experience. And it increases your access to the salient information. Now, notice salient information. If you have access to technology, what technology is it, and what assumptions are automatically you making?
Pencil's technology, technically, but I think he's speaking more of electronic internet-based.
Does everybody have access to
Yeah.
it?
Is it,
There you go.
so the Google Drive that we use here for the seminary, I mean, you can be in Greenwood or you can be in Greenland and still get to the Google Drive.
Yep, if you have the access.
Right.
If you're in a field experience somewhere, so we talked about Zambia earlier. Zambia has so much better infrastructure than we do. Their phones are so much more advanced than ours. But this is also a country that has one escalator in the country. Seriously. They have elevators, but they have one escalator and people line up in the shopping mall. And you go to a city like Ndola and they're like, oh, we would love to have an escalator. But their phones make ours look pathetic because we're 2 generations behind. We're about to get 5G and they're like, we've had 5G for years, you crazy people. What? But we're America, we're supposed to be the best and above. Whoops. Let's say you get placed in some place like Zambia and you're in a town, let's say Ndolo, since I brought it up. Would you automatically have internet access? No. But everyone in Ndola has internet access, why wouldn't you? Because you're there for field placement. You might not think to bring your iPhone or upgrade to, the latest, which is half the price there or whatever. You might not think about just buying a SIM card for there and having access, like, oh, I'm going to be without my phone. So the bigotry of, oh, American, ours is better, and then you're confronted with it, that sometimes limits you down. How many guys that have been on deployment have gone, it's hard to come back to these slow networks with spotty coverage? And you're like, yeah, that's a reality at times. So we have to stop and think, when we're talking about it, even if the pencil is the technology, does the pencil decrease isolation? Yes. That technology allowed us to write letters to our mentors, to our friends, to our family, and decrease isolation. The internet allows us to bring up, so I use Zoom, because sometimes the bandwidth is terrible to certain places. So I have a friend who lives out in Picardy, which is about an hour northwest of Paris. And he doesn't want to pay for landline or anything, so he uses his phone. But the reception out in Picardy, it's a rural area, it's unbelievably gorgeous. It's painfully beautiful. But he uses his phone. So when we video conference, we have to use Zoom because things like FaceTime, there's not enough bandwidth. But Zoom, there is. But Zoom is not a popular one. But it's used by more people outside the US. Again, now they advertise on NPR, so you have people saying, oh, well, it must be for kind of liberal elites or something. It's on NPR. Instead of saying, no, the product is not in with it. Don't conflate issues, right? How are we decreasing isolation so that we can ask questions? If you're going to host a field experience and field training for someone, do you want them to be able to access you and lean on you when they need to?
Yes.
Yes. It's not, no, you sink or swim. If you're teaching someone to swim, you still have a lifeguard right there, right? They might sink a little bit, but then you pull them out of the water. You don't want them to die. But that's sometimes how we treat field experience. So we want them to have access, we just say, don't use it unless you need it. But what is need becomes a question. They may not be able to articulate what the need really is. So the technologies are helpful for it. And then salient information, if I were to ask for a show of hands, which since I'm recording this I won't, because people at home in front of a computer going, do I raise my hand or not? That's awkward. How many of you have a Bible on your phone? Do you have one, John? No? Do you have a Bible one? It's really a neat thing. So I have a couple different versions, different programs.
I have several translations on my phone.
Yeah.
And I carry one.
On my iPad, I have the Sword Project, which is my favorite free program. It's like Logos minus $895. It's basically the same thing. It's not quite as good, not as in-depth, but it's free. Hey, I have, I think, 25 different translations of the Bible on there because I also need it in French and German. I have the Latin Vulgate on there because I took Latin when I was younger. And I really want to make sure that I don't lose my Latin just from an academic standpoint. Do I use that as the inspired word of God? Well, sometimes, even if I know that they got it wrong at points. But I still look at it for that. And I still want to understand what is salient. There are also things that I will put onto people's phones when they go out for a psych field experience that they have use for, even without basic knowledge at times. It's better to have access to. So I'll put Hippocrates if they're dealing with addicts. So when I teach alcohol and drug rehabilitation, I will put Hippocrates on their phone. I say, I want you to make sure that you have this program so that if they bring you the pills, you can take a picture of it and it will identify what those pills are. And it will tell you what the side effects are, and it will tell you what the drug interactions are. And again, it's a free program. Hippocrates. It's worth a lot more than the free price. But these kind of things, salient information. I want them to have, if they're working with abused children, I want them to have access and have the information of what are the legal issues that they have to watch out for. When can they require their sheriff's deputy, who is supposed to be assigned with them, to arrest that person or to call DSS and take away their kids? They have to have that salient information. They don't always remember it. And if you're in the heat of the moment, something you have been trained on and you made A's on the exams, goes out the window just like when that 5-year-old died and you're thinking, how was I trained to talk to this child's mother? It's not always right there, even if you have been trained and trained well. That is the human condition. So I want you to think a little bit about hardware and software. What are the limitations? I have a wonderful Bible program that when I have Wi-Fi is great. Why do you laugh, Franklin? What did I just not say?
That happened to me early in my ministry, and now I only preach from, I have just a regular Bible. I had that to happen, and I had to wing it, which wasn't a bad thing, but at that point in my ministry, I wasn't accustomed to memorizing my sermon.
Yeah.
It was before I took Dr.
Holmes'
class.
Yep.
So, it was just, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And from that experience, from that experience, I type everything, I have it, but I try to do have more preparation now.
Yeah.
And that is probably the best thing you heard me say it more than once. It helped me in my preaching was to know my sermon.
Yeah.
When you get up there, know your sermon, read the scripture over and over, read your rough draft over and over, and know your sermon. Now,
Read it in Hebrew, read it in Greek, read it in...
Read it, whatever. I have it there with me, but rarely I look down to look at it, but I have it there with me.
Yep.
It's just like,
Security blanket.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the best information, advice I can give to anybody,
Yeah.
that preaches, know your sermon, prepare.
Absolutely.
Prepare.
And know the limitations.
Yes, of your software. Yeah, if you're using that, know that you may not have Wi-Fi, it may go out, or something may happen.
You know, one of the things that I've gotten in the habit of doing, it works for the churches that I tend to preach in, because they usually have a bulletin and they'll print the Bible verses in there. So they will have the Old Testament, they'll have the Psalm, they'll have the Epistle, and then they'll have the Gospel. And I will take that bulletin that's been handed out to everyone, and when they're being read, I will mark through the points that I have already prepared for my sermon.
Right.
So they're highlighted, and I use my Erskine highlighter pen that we give out all the time. It's pen on one side, highlight on the other. I use that particular pen, because I have a bunch of them, and I will highlight those lines to make sure that I am reinforcing one more time the information that I need to get across, and it's also another crutch. Should I need to, because my mind goes blank. And my mind might go blank for a bunch of different reasons. The first time that you look at that widow that you just preached her husband's funeral, or Only Human, that incredible cleavage on Mrs. Jones right there, and it's just staring you in the face, and you have a human moment. Nothing that everyone wants to admit, but it happens.
That happens.
Even if you would never look at another person besides your wife, I'm sorry, during a sermon, sometimes anything can happen. Luckily, that particular one hasn't happened to me, but it happened to a very dear friend of mine, and it was...
will now.
Your what?
It will now.
It will now, probably, yeah. Because I said it hasn't. Well, that's an invitation, isn't it? So we go through and we think about what's about to happen. So what's on the horizon, and what technologies are going to help us more with field education? We now have printable cloth. So you can have your cell phone screen on your sleeve, literally, and it flexes with the screen. They're already in theater, in military operations. They've been used for a couple of years now. So you actually Bluetooth your screen. What about straight into your arm? That's now a thing, that your body powers it. So you don't ever need to plug in your screen. It's always powered by your body. And it's right in your arm. Is that terrifying in a way? Should be. But at the same time, 20 years from now, people go, oh, you remember when we had to carry those phones? People are like, hello? Technology changes. How is that going to increase or decrease the efficacy of your field experience? That's the question I want you to wrestle with. So that you are not so focused on this is the way it's supposed to be that you can't see how it should be properly using new technologies or whatever. That's what Wozniak is really saying. And then, what are social issues? So Franklin, when you pull out that printed Bible, what are the deleterious aspects of that to the congregation?
To me, it resonates with my congregation because they are an older congregation that has not embraced technology. Now I've seen preachers, don't get me wrong, I've seen preachers preach some dynamite sermons from pads and stuff, but me, my congregation, I think would prefer to see me with the Bible. I do use an NIV as opposed to a King James. I have gravitated to the NIV, and I like
Wild
that.
man.
But I use a Bible. I preach from a Bible, and I have a notepad. Sometimes I have just make notes.
Right.
But I don't have my sermon with me. I just have notes.
But when you get up there with that leather-bound NIV, you are making a statement to the people. You are making a statement without saying a word. You are stating how you want to communicate the scripture.
Right.
If you go up there with an iPad in your hand, you are making a statement to the people. And they interpret that really fast.
Oh, yeah.
You go up with something cool. the connection here, this is a wireless connection to that projector. That's kind of cool. That makes a statement. If you do that in a church, oh, I don't need a wire, don't worry about it. I'm cool. Ooh, Mr. Fancy, right? All of these things are statements that affect our preaching, that affect our field experiences. When I was at Wake, we were all given Palm Pilots. You remember Palm Pilots way back when?
Yeah.
And ours were color. Oh, no one had color. They hadn't released these things to the general populace. They were just for medical professionals. And we were like, ooh, I got color. You made sure everyone could see you playing Bejeweled on that thing. Even though you shouldn't be playing with it, but still, that's what everyone, and it had a camera in it. And all of a sudden that camera changed the way that people saw us because, oh, if you've seen the current regs for military medical personnel, everything is supposed to be documented, right? Every injury is supposed to be photographed right then and there. And if you have access to a Pentacam, you use a Pentacam, which, I'm sorry, it's cool tech. You don't need an X-ray machine now. Psh, done. I love this thing. No X-rays? Yeah. See right through the person? Yeah, this is cool. 5 times thicker than that regular iPad, but so what? We document it. I walk in with an iPad. Oh, it's just an iPad. You walk in with that extra thick one, all of a sudden people are like, you must be one of those top medical professionals in order to have a Pentacam. Ooh, 1.5 million frames a second. Yeah, get out of here. You don't need an X-ray machine anymore. And you're documenting everything. That is the statement. No matter what technology you use, you're making a statement to people around you. 2 leather bound? Ooh, what statement are you making? Right?
I like being confused, and that's why I have 2 different versions.
That means you're a seminary student if you like to be confused.
It's perpetual.
All right, the last one, which we're actually technically over time right now, but let me just finish up this last thing because it is important for us to think about decentralized. Right now, you are in centralized theological education. Yet, Erskine also sponsors decentralized theological education. Am I just talking about EVC? No. So we have a lot of wonderful people who are missionaries who go around the world. We have amazing missionaries in Pakistan, for example. We have fantastic, Dr. Carson goes through Uganda, goes through other nations in Africa, and he teaches at the different seminaries, he teaches at the different churches to empower and equip people. And they will sometimes bring tech or whatever that has to be standalone. And it has to be able to serve where they are. When we think of decentralized theological education, we tend to think of correspondence courses. We tend to think about things like EVC, the Erskine Virtual Campus. Do we also think about things like iTunes U? Why is that more important in some ways? Personal fight that I've had here. I think we need to be on iTunes U, providing free courses. Oh.
I would say 2 things. One, there's some brand recognition there, right? iTunes is iTunes. It's not videos on Google Drive. And I love our videos on Google Drive. But iTunes is something else. And accessibility. I mean, Apple is a international brand. So is Google, but Google is so vast that somebody going into Google looking for our videos is never going to be able to find them. Whereas somebody Googling Reformed Theological Education on iTunes U is going to find a more limited number of options.
They're going to find Dallas Theological Seminary, Liberty University. They might find a course or 2 from Yale. That's about it.
RTS. That's all.
RTS has a couple.
Yep.
Yeah. But they don't find us. Why does that become more important in the modern era for theological education that's decentralized?
one standpoint, I think this having worked at the college, you know, for us to be a viable option for people. Otherwise, they'll go find some other viable option.
Yeah.
And we exist because we believe that we are providing a service, a style, and a you know, tradition of theological education that's important for people to know. So we want to be out there and provide that to people.
It's also not everyone who needs to learn information is a traditional seminary student. Some of them just need. You might have someone who has been a preacher for 30 years in a denomination, they don't send their people to seminary, but they want to get better in this one particular venue. They really need to understand how to do exegesis properly, because that's been what's hurting their relationship with God and their preaching and helping draw others near, is that they've been eisegeting at times. So we provide something that is distributed, that is not part of a course necessarily. I'm a big fan of Coursera and edX. I think they're amazing. Can you earn a degree through them? No. Can you now earn certificates through them? Yeah. Do you get college credit? No. Do you get amazing education? Yes. If you've never done one of these, I always recommend you start with one that's most needed, especially for seminary students, that we don't provide anywhere. And that's Justice at Harvard University. And if you Google Justice Harvard, it's going to be the first thing that comes up. And it is a free course that is available in something like this. And it teaches you about justice. And if you think justice is one thing, if you don't understand justice, there are many, many forms of justice, then you really should watch a course like that. Our idea of greater need for decentralized education, sometimes people have been faithfully taught in a tradition, but that tradition was governed by a nation for a particular political purpose. Right now, if you look at what's happening with the Eastern Orthodox Church, so Ukraine splitting off the church so that it's autocephalous, that has its own head now instead of answering to the Patriarch of Moscow. That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not 1305 huge, but that's really big, because now all of a sudden they're able to divorce the political ideas and the political training that has been endemic to the Ukrainian church.
I had some people, family that went over to Moldova, and they were doing a sermon, and some Russian monks guys were going, no, where are you getting that from? That's not what our Bible said. Yeah, well, it wasn't written by Stalin and Lenin.
Yep, that's exactly it. So right now, many places in the world where freedom is being tasted for the first time by a lot of individuals, we mentioned Uganda. There are a lot of Reformed people who are going through and trying to say, let's read the Bible together. Let's have that relationship so that it's not just about hatred. Yes, we can make statements, this is good, that is bad. But if it's about hatred and death, it's probably not to God's glory, it's to a political purpose. And those are tough, especially in a Reformed world, for us to talk about, because we have a lot of strong feelings about certain things. So if you read through this again, try and think, where are we falling short, where we could be doing a lot more and a lot better, okay? Let's end this lecture here. Let me stop this and